You're listening to Crazy Shit in Real Estate. You'll be amazed at all these wild but true situations that others have found themselves in. Because on this show, you'll hear uncensored, unbelievable stories from the world of real estate. I'm Leigh Brown. Let's dive right in. Before you get the rest of the story, I'd love to share a quick message from today's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Follow Up Boss, one of the leading CRMs, client relationship managers for residential real estate. Tons of top producing agents and some of the fastest growing teams out there are using Follow Up Boss to increase lead conversion, eliminate busy work that you're not doing anyway, and frankly, deliver a higher class experience in real estate to everybody who chooses you as their realtor of choice. So if you're going to keep listening to this, which I know you will, there's more information and a personal review of Follow Up Boss. For more information, go to followupboss.com/crazy. Hello, friends. Leigh Brown here, and you have landed on Crazy Shit in Real Estate. Today, we're talking about Boston real estate, but in an entirely different way. In fact, you're going to have to put in your inner Kerry Washington as we go into this episode. And remember what she says on Scandal? It's handled. So make sure you enjoy this episode with Kate Ziegler. I'll see you on the other side. Thank you for being willing to come on the show.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. I'm really excited to be here. It's a fun podcast, so I like listening to it.
Your resume is pretty impressive.
Thank you. I will tell you, Leigh.
Or you've got great PR people, or both?
I don't have PR people yet. I'm not there yet, but we're working on it. So it's.
Are you your own PR?
Yeah.
Then you have PR people.
Well, yes. Excellent point. Absolutely.
All right. So give us a little bit of flair of Kate. Who is Kate? What does she do? Where'd she come from? Tell us something we need to know.
Absolutely. So I am a real estate investor and realtor in Boston, Massachusetts, and based out of New London, New Hampshire. So I work in both states, which in New England is something you can do reasonably because the states are so small. I got my start. I grew up in a construction family. So I grew up working with my dad on roofing and framing and siding and doing all of that kind of work. And when my husband and I decided to sort of see what we could tackle in an entrepreneurial sense years and years ago, we got into real estate to start as investors. So I came at real estate a little bit backwards from how a lot of agents that I know got into this space and started from the investing side. We did a house hack in Boston. That was our first purchase, like complete maniacs before we owned a car and before, we were biking everywhere and we had this 3-decker house and we
wait a minute. You bought a house before you had a car? Also a big city kind of a thing.
Very much a city kind of a thing. Yeah. But I mean, we've just put all of our savings into that first purchase, which has worked out well for us. I'm glad we did it. We learned a lot. It was honestly still, after years and years as a salesperson, it's still the worst deal I've ever done. That purchase took 6-7 months. It was a nightmare. Everyone was terrible, but we got it there. So when we started thinking about looking at our second property, we decided I really want to get my license so that I know what we're doing, so that I can control this a little bit more and be more involved. And I got my sales license as a result of that. We now both are full-time in real estate. My husband, Jack, is also a realtor in Massachusetts, and we manage our properties, our rental properties, and renovate and spend all of our days doing all things related to real estate. So I now work mostly with probably about 70% buyers, 30% sellers in the Boston area, and then mostly with buyers in New Hampshire, and spend my time. Right now, we're renovating a house in New Hampshire that we like to hide out at in the woods when we can get away from Boston, and also manage our rental properties in Boston and do renovations and projects here as well. So at this point, our lives are all real estate all the time. We don't have many hobbies other than swinging hammers and helping clients find what they need.
Well, it doesn't sound like you have a lot of time for a bunch of hobbies, because these are obviously really time-intensive things. And for my viewers who have been on my other episodes, if you listen to the one with Erica, where we talked about the podcast, House Then the Car, I'm not talking about that version of House Then the Car. And that one, we're talking about people and their spending habits. And this one, we all know that most people in normal places in the country, you get a car first because that's how we get to our jobs. But of course, in a city, that's different. So I'm curious about that first property, because I think for a lot of us, that first flip, the first renovation, the first investment, the first primary purchase. You're always glad you did it because you have to get into the game sometimes to learn it. But it is often the one where we're learning as we go. And real estate's definitely that way. And even though you and your husband got your licenses to learn more about real estate, the license gives you what you get working with that first buyer or the first seller. So in looking back at that first investment, that first property you bought to work on, and it took too long, and you had the wrong contractors, if you could go back and do anything differently on that property, what's the one thing you would go back and investigate further, do differently? What's the little bullet point for my note takers out there?
Yeah, the one thing, the top thing, and I still tell clients this all the time, is I would have shopped around more for an agent. I think our agent is somebody I've since worked with as an agent. I've done other deals with him. He's a good agent. He was not the right agent for us. And we just didn't know. We didn't know enough to ask, how do you work? How will you communicate with us? And we didn't know we could make a change, even when we realized he was just much more relaxed than my husband and I are. We needed more information and we needed more context of what was going on. And he just wasn't the right agent. He wasn't the right fit for us. So if I could do
anybody in Boston was relaxed. There's relaxed in Boston because that's new to me.
Maybe he's not originally from here. I'm not either. I grew up in Pennsylvania, but yeah, he just was not the right communication style fit for us.
Right, so what question would you have asked? Because as realtors, we often try to be all things to all people. It's one of the good things about realtors. They're definitely trying to respond to the public. And the bad things is we're spread very thin. So would you have asked more about the communication channel or the frequency of communication or the response time? Where would you specifically have drilled in?
I think if I were doing that particular thing again, I would have asked more about the big picture, like how do all of these parts fit together? Walk me through the whole thing. What I try to tell clients to do, or people who are asking me, how do I find somebody who's a good fit for me, would be you really should be telling your agent, I need communication on these things. These are my anxieties and where I need your support and I need some additional information, or I don't want you to call me. Please text me, or please don't text me because I'll read it right away. I want you to send me an email. Letting somebody know what your preferences are so that as an agent, I can try to meet you there, or I can tell you, I don't work that way. If you send me an email on a Saturday when I'm in the car driving to showings, I'm not going to see it until I get home at the end of the day. And you need to be able to reach out to me other ways. So having some more communication around that, I think would have been really helpful for me at that point. And also knowing you can make a change. If it's not the right person, and if you're having these conversations and it's just not hitting, you can change who your agent is. I think that's one of the things that I just didn't know. I figured, well, we talked to this guy. He seemed nice enough. We're in it. And then 18 months later, we were still banging our heads against a wall trying to figure out what was happening and not feeling like we were getting the support we needed.
So I love how you're bringing this up because it's fascinating to me that we're in a world where loyalty is one of those traits that seems to be elusive. But then you look at real estate and we find that buyers and sellers are very loyal to somebody who's not loyal to them, who's not responsive to them, or that they haven't even signed any agreements with. And I'm thinking now about a conversation I had the last week of December. We were down at our beach house and I went to another property that we own. And I was just speaking to the tenants, checking in, y'all good? You need anything? And they were telling me, we're ready to buy a property. Can you help us? And I said, nope, that's not my area. I'm 3 hours away. I'm not your best choice. And they said, oh, well, we've been getting houses from this lady by email for 1.5 years. I guess we should use her. And I said, we're going to ask her any questions, or are you just going to use her because she's been sending you automated emails? And they said, we feel obligated to use her because she's been sending us emails. And I was like, there's so much more to this than that. And so then we all had a cocktail at 8 a.m. and I explained to them how it works, but we don't often get that opportunity. So when you're talking to your buyers and your sellers, and we'll just assume your husband does as well as you do, if you're talking to them the first time, how do you convey to them that you're going to bring something to the table that is beneficial to them in that big picture way that you wish you'd had? Do you lay this out for them? Is this in your pre-marketing? Is it on your website? Is it in the consultation? Give us a little insight as to how you're educating the people around you, because I hope that everybody that's listening or watching this is thinking about the next time you hire a realtor, how you can do it better. So make sure you're taking notes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the way that I try to approach it is I actually put together a timeline of the whole process, one that I wish I had seen. If somebody had just shown me that and told me, hey, here's where you need to be able to write checks, that would have eased so much of my anxiety in this whole process the first time. And so I spell out that timeline. And if I can do a full consultation with somebody early on, we talk through that timeline point by point and say, look, here's where you need cash. And here's how all of these parts fit together. This week is going to be hectic. And this week, you're going to have to just keep breathing deeply. And we talk through all of those things early on, as early as I can get them to commit to talking to me for an hour. And then I send people a copy of that. I send them, here's a guide to Bigger Pockets. A handful of years ago had a really good guide to the financing process on how that all comes together. I send people links to those things, links to my favorite calculators. Let's talk through how the numbers fit together. And just trying to give people an overview of all of that. And honestly, Leigh, I say at the end of my call with every single first conversation I have with buyers is like, look, if you decide at the end of this that you never want to hear me talk about a basement again, it's not personal and you don't need to listen to me anymore. That's okay. And I really try to give people that out and say, if somebody else is a better fit, you should work with that person. You deserve to work with somebody that you like and that you trust. And if your search takes some time, you don't want to be dreading seeing your realtor every weekend. You want to be able to sort of
oh my gosh. Yes. Don't dread me. I love that. Don't dread me. That should be your hashtag. It's a little bit negative, but that's a great,
we can workshop it.
And we shouldn't dread our clients either. Because sometimes as a realtor, you have a client that you see them calling and you're like, oh God. And it shouldn't be that way because we are in a really competitive business with a realtor everywhere you go, and also a very large segment of the public that would like to buy or sell. So it should be fun on both sides. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. No, it can be more fun. We want it to be fun. It's also a huge stressful purchase, but it doesn't need to be pulling teeth. I don't want people to dread me pulling up at an open house on the weekend. That's not good.
Okay. So I told y'all that I would do a review of Follow Up Boss, because I'm your friend in real estate, and I did. Now, there's a blue million CRM out there. I mean, if you go to any Facebook group, every realtor's like, which one should I use? Which one should I use? And you know that these CRM, which are client relationship managers or customer relationship manager, whatever you want to call it, it's truly a system that's just designed to help you know what to do next because you're very busy and you're a multitasker in real estate. And with all those different tasks and balls up in the air, you need something to help you stay on track. And that's what Follow Up Boss does. Now, when you save a name and a phone number in there, that is basically a Rolodex. Follow Up Boss is going to take the names and phone numbers and also help you know what to do next. So you can maintain these relationships with your neighbors, because that's what this is about. Real estate is not about serving just prospects and clients. It's about taking great care of your neighbors' needs in real estate. And if you'll use a tool like Follow Up Boss, where they remember you, they might even call you when they're ready to buy or sell again, or when their mom and daddy do, or their best friend or their kid, and you want to be top of mind, that's what a product like Follow Up Boss will do for you. Truly, it's going to change your business when you start paying better attention to people. They don't have to know you used Follow Up Boss, but they'll totally understand that they are being heard by you. So now there's a free trial for my people because you're loved. Go to followupboss.com/crazy. No credit card is required. And frankly, because you're my people and we made an ask for you, Follow Up Boss said, yes, you get double the free trial. That's actually enough time to log in, put some pieces in it, and watch it change your business as it has for so many realtors and teams nationwide. Again, go to followupboss.com/crazy to start your free trial today. Because it's stressful, if you enjoy the person who is your professional cohort in this, it will take some of that stress down a notch so that you can manage the stress. You're not going to manage the stress well if you hate each other and the process is painful and then you run into a lender issue or an appraisal issue or whatever else. I got to give a second high five there to the Bigger Pockets podcast because it's
absolutely
an amazing source of information. And we mention it probably every other episode. So friends, if you have not subscribed over there, it's totally worth your time. All right. So Kate, now we know a little bit more about you and how you conduct business. And so, the whole premise of the podcast here, we want to hear the things nobody ever expects about real estate. So I'd love to know in the many different versions of your life around real estate, I guess, from picking up roof and nails to being an owner, property manager, realtor, and a couple in real estate. There's so many angles you could go in. Wagering, you had trouble to just one good story, but what's the crazy thing you would tell me if we were sitting down together to have an adult beverage in Boston?
Leigh, I didn't expect that this conversation was going to lead so well into it, but I have a story for you that is an inspection story, but also really an example of the polar opposite way that I think we should be treating our clients. So in Boston, one of the things that you have to do at a home inspection, even if it's midsummer, is run the heating system. Pretty typical, especially in New England. We got to make sure the heat works. And so I was in a home inspection over the summer, this past summer, and typically you'll turn on the heating system, twist up that thermostat before you go in to do the inspection in the basement. So most of our buildings have basements. Most of the heating systems are in the basements. And we did that, had gone through the unit. It was a condo in Boston, had gone through the unit, went down in the basement with the heat fired up. And as we were working our way around the perimeter of the foundation, started getting a strange smell in a basement. And I've smelled a lot of basements. This was not something that you normally come across. And my inspector and my clients and I were sort of doing that thing where you ignore a little bit what it is that's going on around you. And you're like, I don't know, maybe maybe this is fine. Maybe nothing's happening. And we got to the center of the basement. We had worked our way around the foundation wall, got to the center of the basement and took the cover off of the boiler, which was firing because we were testing the heat, and found that there was a dead rat in the bottom of the boiler that had crawled in there to die, and we were roasting it because the boiler was firing. It was disgusting. So we covered that back up, shut the heat down. And the thing that you need to know about this particular situation is that these clients had been living in Boston since they came to college. They had rentals in Boston when they were early in college. And there's a particular neighborhood of Boston that's a little bit notorious for their rodent issues and for being an area where college students tend to congregate for very low rent apartments, a lot of not great landlords. It's a work in progress over there. But one of my clients had one of these experiences when he was in college. He had a rat issue in his apartment in this rental. And this was his one deal breaker, his one thing that was like, there cannot be a rodent problem in the condo that I purchased. And I had heard that and I had internalized that. We had talked about it. And then we found this rat in the boiler. So we called in
the roasted rat, though. Was he allergic to roasted rats or just living rats? That's a specific question you should have asked Kate.
It is. I should put that on my intake questionnaire. So now I know. So we called in a pest company and said, hey, can you check this out? Is this a one-off situation? Is this just a complete fluke? Is there a recurring issue? Should we be concerned? Shout out to Keith Parrish at NW Pest. He was terrific. The home inspector, also somebody I work with a lot, Dave Eldon at Eldon Home Inspection, terrific sport about this whole thing. Probably not the worst thing I've ever sent him into. We wrapped this up. We did a separate pest inspection. My buyer said, you know what? We're fine. We feel like this was a one-off situation. As long as they get the rat out of there before closing, totally fine. We don't have any other inspection items. That's our only ask. That's all we want. And I said, okay. And this is pretty typical in Boston right now, just because like everywhere, there's no inventory. It's very competitive. So long lists of inspection items are not happening here. Usually there's one or two things. We're pretty strategic. And we said this, passed this along to the selling agent, and we're approaching closing. Everything was going pretty smoothly after the roasted rat. And I texted the agent before walkthrough, and I just had a feeling, I just had a sense that they hadn't dealt with this issue because nobody wanted to pull the rat out of the boiler. And I decided to go to final walkthrough early. I beat my clients there. I said, I'm going to try really hard not to name him. I said to him, did you address the rat? Did somebody take the rat out of the boiler? And he said, well, I don't know. We'll have to go check. So we walked down to the stairs to the basement. It was still there, Leigh. It was still there. And I had put bags and gloves in my car because I knew. I just had a sense. I knew. And you do this too. You know that you have times where you're like, I know this is not going to go right. I know they're not going to do what they're supposed to do. And the other agent looked at me and said, well, there's just some things I don't do. This is not my job. And I pulled that rat out of the boiler, Leigh, and disposed of it far away. And my client said, Kate, I need to know, I know you did this for us, but I need to know if I'm going to find that by accident. Is it hidden somewhere here? And I said, it is not. It is taken care of. Do not worry about it. And that, I think, really exemplifies, I just will never forget him looking at me and saying, there are some things I won't do. And I really think that is the polar opposite of how we should be thinking about our client's experience, how we should be thinking about what we can do to support a transaction, to support the whole deal, and to support our fellow agents. Just like there was one request here. I didn't say you had to do it. I just wanted somebody to do it. that was the only thing we asked.
Your marketing piece could have a picture of Kerry Washington from Scandal, which is easily my favorite character on all of TV and all of life, where she's like, it's handled, and Laura
exactly
so much. But that's what you did. And then the second question I have to ask, is this a vacant property, or people living in this property with a stinky roasted rat in the boiler?
It was. So the condo itself was vacant, but there are other tenants in this building. There are other owners in this building. So it's very common. Boston and New England broadly, but Boston and sort of Eastern Massachusetts especially have a lot of what we call three-deckers. So I think Chicago calls them triplexes. We have different names for these, but 3 units. And in Boston, a lot of those have been converted to condos. So there's 3 owners in this building. One, the seller in this case, had moved out. So the unit was vacant, and it was July. So they weren't running the heat until we got in there for a home inspection. But I would have thought the other owners in the interceding 45 days would have wanted that addressed as well.
Unless they were like y'all, where they were like, maybe I'm not smelling anything, something like that. But as a property owner, if you are told about something like this in your vacant property, be a decent human. I mean,
just address it.
I've said, oh my gosh, my neighbors might smell this. How disgusting. And called a handy person off of Nextdoor or Facebook Marketplace. You'd find somebody that would have done it for $100 and hauled off the dead rat.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it just such a shame when we're not willing to consider. And I just knew if we got there and my clients had seen those little legs sticking out the bottom, it would have been not good. It would have been game over.
I've done a lot of things for clients. I've never pulled a roasted rat out of anything. And I'll be honest with you, I probably would have called my handy guy while I was there to come over here and do it, because I don't know if I could. Because in the case where when you pulled it out, surely his little leg light came off.
It was pretty desiccated at this point. It was pretty well roasted. I probably should have called my husband in for that one, but I didn't. I took care of it. So
so gross. It's so gross. So they bought the property. They're still happily living there.
They love it, and they have not found any other rodents. So all's well that ends well.
When they hear this episode, they won't have to be stressed that you said, oh yeah, I just left it after all, because you did
exactly
take care of it and hauled it out of there.
Exactly. So that's my crazy story, Leigh. I don't know. I have others, but you've touched on so many good topics in your podcast that I felt like that one was the one that probably hadn't come up before.
I'm kind of grossed out right now, which is good because we're recording this before lunch. And so it's going to help me eat less for lunch. I appreciate that. This is your diet.
Happy to help.
This is a good thing we're recording it in January. All right. So Kate, let me ask you one more thing before I let you off the podcast, because obviously demographically, even though I look really young, you're much younger than I am. And so when you're talking to other people that are thinking of buying and selling real estate and they're in your generation, we know that there are a lot of people right now that are very nervous about, do they do things? Do they not do things? Do we keep renting? We want to make sure we can take the next job somewhere else. They're nervous about putting down roots. What do you tell a younger buyer who, in a very fluid environment, like a place like Boston, you have people that change jobs on the fly. They might go to New York. They might go to LA. They might come to Charlotte. What do you tell them when they're on the fence about putting down permanent roots and buying?
I have this conversation a lot. And the phrase that we uttered in our household, and we still do, and that I repeat to my clients is, it doesn't need to be your forever home. So you can still buy and start building equity and be hedging against inflation and have all of the benefits of being an owner without it being your forever and ever, I am going to, be 85 in this living room home. That's okay. There are transaction costs to buying and selling, and there always will be, but it doesn't mean that the numbers don't work. And so I have a lot of conversations with people, especially in urban markets, about what would you be able to do in terms of renting out this condo? If you're buying a condo, and especially single female clients tend to be like, well, what if I meet someone? What if what if I have babies? What if I do these things? And what if this condo isn't right for me 5 years from now? And it's okay if it's not, if you've put some thought into, what do your numbers look like? Could you rent it out and cover most of your costs if for some reason you couldn't sell it for what you need to? If for some reason the market contracts and you can't get rid of it for what you need to fulfill your situation and make the change you need, could you rent it out? And what would that look like? And so I spent a lot of time helping people talk through those numbers and the pros and cons of a specific property if it's going to help them hedge their bets and feel more confident and more empowered to make that choice and to move into homeownership. So I think it doesn't need to be your forever home. The other thing that I keep telling people right now, though, Leigh, is you got to stop zooming out on Redfin and Zillow. The pinch to zoom is a little too easy. And I get people sending me things on the western side of our state, which is not a big state, but it's still further than you want to be in many cases. And you have to stop zooming out because you need to just wait, unfortunately, and the location you can't change. You need to be where you want to be, and that's worth waiting for.
I love that. So there you go, friends. There's an episode with a million different angles in it. And obviously, we could have talked to Kate all day about all these different lives that she's lived in real estate. But Kate, if somebody's interested in talking to you about real estate in the Boston area or into New Hampshire, and they want somebody that can help them compare and contrast, and we're not going to advertise that you'll get dead roasted rats out of the boy.
No, that's not going in my marketing.
So what's the best way for people to find you?
So I spend a lot of time on Instagram because I like being able to follow my clients' babies and birthdays and all of their life milestones. So I'm KZiegs on Instagram, which is KZIEGS. I spend a lot of time posting there on sort of tips for buyers and sellers and what's happening in the market and what I'm working on if people care to see us jacking up our house in New Hampshire and leveling the floors and doing that kind of stuff. And then I also have a Substack email list that's kateziegler.substack.com. So longer format, I tend to be a little bit wordy. So I have anything that's over a caption limit in Instagram ends up going into Substack in a slightly longer format read if people have any interest in following their things on winterizing your house and doing all of those sorts of things. So those are the best two places. I also have a website, katebostonrealestate.com, that will link to press and articles, and all of those things are also linked on my website. So you could find me there.
Perfect. Well, friends, there you go. You can go get her uncensored thoughts on Substack, which is the only place it doesn't censor anymore. You can get all the happy on Instagram, and you can get all the real estate on her website, and all of her links and handles are in the show notes for this episode. So if you didn't write it down, no stress, just go click through, leave her a happy comment in wherever you're watching this, whether you're on your podcast provider or you're on our YouTube or Rumble channels, and let her know what you learned today. And Kate, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving us an insight and a diet episode. We don't get a lot of those, so appreciate that.
Happy to help. Leigh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, guys, make sure you subscribe for more, give us 5 stars, and most importantly, we'll see you next time. Okay, now don't forget to go try Follow Up Boss so that your business can continue to expand in professionalism, and then you can meet some more crazy people yourself. I really appreciate Follow Up Boss sponsoring this episode, but mainly I appreciate them for giving y'all double the free trial time with no credit card required. So make sure you go to followupboss.com/crazy and then let me know what you think. I'll see you guys next time.
As always, I'm so super thrilled that you joined in for more crazy shit. And if you're a realtor, investor, inspector, lender, or just a regular human being who happens to have an unbelievable story that you need to tell the world about, or frankly, you just need to one-up the story you just heard, then make sure to DM me on Instagram at Leigh Thomas Brown, or tweet me at Leigh Brown, or frankly, any social network where you hang out. I'm there. And if you had some fun, then you totally want to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.